Welcome, adventurers, to Tome and Torch, the podcast where we explore the monsters lurking in the dark corners of gaming history.
Among other things.
We're your hosts, Dex Modifier
and Rhea Frost.
And today we're tackling a creature that's eaten more adventurers than a dragon's had hot meals, the notorious Mimic.
Ouch! That's gonna leave a mark. If you've ever had your character reach for treasure only to find that treasure reaching back, you're not alone. Today, we're diving deep into the history of gaming's most deceptive monster.
But first, a word from our imaginary sponsor.
Are you tired of losing limbs to mimics? Introducing Chester's Chest Checker, the 10-foot pole that does the dying for you. Just poke any suspicious treasure and let our patented mimic detection technology do the rest.
I used to lose a party member every dungeon. Now, I just lose poles.
Chester's Chest Checker, because your loot shouldn't bite back.
Before Gary Gygax ever dreamed up the chest with teeth, cultures worldwide were already telling tales of things that weren't what they seemed. Let's start our journey in Japan, where the concept of household objects coming to life is practically a national pastime.
Imagine your trusty umbrella suddenly sprouting an eye and hopping around your house. In Japanese folklore, they call these tsukumogami, ordinary household items that gain life and consciousness after 100 years of loyal service. I don't know about you, but my IKEA furniture barely lasts 5 years, let alone a century.
During Japan's Heian period, people told stories of discarded objects, from sake pots to sandals, that would suddenly spring to life with eyes, teeth, and a taste for mischief. These weren't always malevolent spirits, sometimes just playful tricksters. But the idea of inanimate objects becoming animated monsters? That's prime mimic territory.
There's even a famous Japanese folktale called Bunbuku Chagama about a tanuki who transforms into a tea kettle. Picture it. You're making your morning tea when suddenly your kettle sprouts a raccoon tail and grins at you. Talk about a wake-up call stronger than caffeine.
But Japan doesn't have a monopoly on shape-shifting tricksters. Let's travel to Mesopotamia, where ancient Iraqi folklore tells of the Tantal, a spirit that could shapeshift from man to beast to inanimate object. This devious entity would appear as something familiar and harmless, maybe a friendly stranger, a cute animal, or just a regular old rock, only to ensnare the unwary who let their guard down.
Sound familiar? Dungeon crawlers?
European sailors had their own version of the mimic concept, the aspidocolone. This was a sea monster so enormous it looked like an island. Sailors would anchor their ships, set up camp, maybe start a little beach barbecue, only for their island to suddenly sink, dragging ship and crew to a watery doom.
Talk about a vacation gone wrong.
The truth is, the mimic as we know it today doesn't come from any single myth. It's more like a greatest hits album of our oldest fears. Cursed objects, shapeshifters, monsters hiding in plain sight, all playing on that primal question, can I trust what I see?
Spoiler alert, in a dungeon? Probably not. So how did these ancient fears transform into the treasure chest with teeth we know and love to hate today? For that, we need to thank, or possibly curse, one man, Gary Gygax, the mastermind behind Dungeons & Dragons. The Mimic made its official debut in the first edition Monster Manual back in 1977. Gygax described it as a subterranean shapeshifter that perfectly mimics wood or stone, usually disguising itself as a chest, door, or even a humble floor tile.
But why did Gygax create such a devious predator? Was he just sadistic?
Well, maybe a little. According to Tim Kask, an old-timer from TSR, which was D&D's original publisher, Gygax invented the Mimic because his players had gotten lazy. They were rushing into dungeons, flinging open chests without a care in the world.
So one day, he decided he'd fool them.
The next chest his players inspected seemed totally normal. No traps, no locks, until, as Kask puts it,
Pop the lid, shove the arm in, no arm.
Talk about a learning moment.
After that encounter, Gygax joked that his players became chest-leery in dungeons.
I bet they did. Nothing makes you paranoid like losing a limb to your loot.
The Mimic was an instant hit with dungeon masters everywhere. It was the perfect gotcha monster to keep even veteran players on their toes. And really, is there anything more satisfying as a DM than the look on your player's faces when you say, "The chest bites your hand"?
But here's something interesting that's often forgotten. D&D's original mimics weren't just mindless, hungry chests. Early editions introduced two variants, a larger, brutish version and a smaller, more intelligent subtype that could actually speak and bargain.
In 1983, a writer named Ed Greenwood expanded the lore with an article titled The Ecology of the Mimic, revealing mimics that could negotiate, make deals, or even coexist with dungeon denizens. One story from Greenwood's article describes a particularly bold mimic that spent 2 years disguised as a statue in a town square, secretly feeding on people who got too close to its pedestal.
Talk about a long con.
Some mimics, according to early D&D lore, grew as large as houses or as small as doormats, with behaviors ranging from aggressive ambushers to solitary scavengers. This richness often gets lost when mimics jump to video games, but it shows that the mimic was originally envisioned as a flexible, evolving creature, a fantasy predator adapted to prey on greed and trust.
Kind of like that friend who asks to borrow money and never pays it back, am I right? It didn't take long for the mimic to slither out of the dungeon and into virtually every corner of gaming. By the 1980s, any game featuring treasure chests was likely to include a sneaky surprise or two. Early computer RPGs like Wizardry and Ultima,
which were directly inspired by D&D,
brought chest-shaped monsters to unsuspecting players. The concept quickly infected Japanese RPGs too. Dragon Quest introduced the Canabox in 1988, and Final Fantasy made monster-in-a-box encounters a staple of its dungeons. In fact, Final Fantasy began with occasional fake chests that triggered battles, and later games featured dedicated mimic enemies that literally pop out of treasure chests to attack the party. If you've played Final Fantasy 9 or 10, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
And you probably still have the emotional scars to prove it.
While D&D's mimic could be any shape, the JRPG interpretation was streamlined. Almost always a treasure chest with teeth. Simple, effective, and guaranteed to make players curse out loud.
But the most notorious modern mimics have to be those from Dark Souls, right?
Right! From Software's Dark Souls series gave us towering, spindly-limbed chest monsters that still haunt players' nightmares. These mimics are gangly, chest-headed monstrosities with impossibly long limbs and an appetite for unwary treasure hunters. Dark Souls cleverly signaled their presence through subtle cues. A chain positioned differently, a barely perceptible breathing motion. Miss the signs and you'd be unceremoniously crunched in the mimic's gaping maw.
My favorite tidbit is that the games even included a grim artifact called the Symbol of Avarice, a chest mimic head that the player can wear as a helmet. It bestows greed-fueled powers at the cost of slowly draining your health.
Subtle metaphor there. Very subtle.
Thanks to Dark Souls, a whole generation of gamers learned to whack every treasure chest once or twice before opening it, just in case. That habit traces straight back to Gygax's first mimic. It's the circle of gaming life.
Other franchises put their own spin on the concept. The Witcher series features Dopplers, shapeshifters that can impersonate people and objects. In Terry Pratchett's Discworld novels, there's the Luggage, a ravenous wooden chest on legs that follows its owner. Essentially a friendly mimic played for laughs.
And in countless other games, from Diablo to Borderlands, from roguelikes to MMORPGs, the mimic appears and reappears, a reliable booby trap monster that keeps us guessing.
As one PC Gamer article quipped,
Mimics have appeared in hundreds of video games since the 1980s, usually as nothing more than a hungry chest.
But whether they're classic chests, carnivorous wardrobes, or entire houses with digestive systems, the mimic's core appeal remains the same. It weaponizes our curiosity and greed. Every gleaming loot cache becomes suspect once a mimic is in play. The result is a delicious tension, a mix of fear and excitement that keeps players suspicious of even their most trusted rewards. In gaming terms, that's pure gold.
Or is it a mimic disguised as gold?
Only one way to find out.
Pull up a chair and grab a drink, adventurers. It's time for Tales from the Tavern, where we share the most bizarre, hilarious, and horrifying stories from actual gaming tables.
First up, we have The Town That Eats You, an infamous D&D campaign that went viral online. One devious dungeon master slowly revealed that an entire town was a gigantic mimic in disguise.
The party of adventurers actually lived in this mimic town, aptly named Lamplight, for 15 in-game sessions before discovering the truth. For weeks of real-time play, they met NPCs, completed quests, and slept in the local inn, completely unaware they were essentially living inside a monster's stomach.
By the time their curiosity led them to pry up a suspicious cobblestone,
it suddenly became pink and fleshy as the illusion lifted.
the whole settlement sprang to life, the gates morphing into gigantic jaws. Their safe haven literally tried to swallow them whole, forcing a harrowing escape as the monstrous town revealed its true form.
15 sessions? That DM deserves a medal for patience, and maybe a psychological evaluation. But it does prove an important point. Why stop at a chest when you can make the entire campaign a mimic?
Here's a lighter one called Buyer Beware, Even of Chairs. One Reddit GM described a dungeon themed as an all-mimic tavern where nothing could be trusted.
Players became so paranoid they attacked every piece of furniture,
Smashing tables, chairs, even the coat rack.
only to find most were normal objects. The innkeeper cheerfully charged them for each broken item, of course.
The true mimics were lurking elsewhere in the dungeon, but by then the adventurers had wrecked half the bar on their own. Talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I love this one because the players essentially played themselves. Sometimes the greatest enemy isn't the mimic, it's gamer paranoia. Up next, we have The Outhouse of Doom.
Not even the bathroom is safe in D&D.
I once encountered a mimic pretending to be an outhouse.
One player recalls. You can imagine the messy surprise that ensued. This DM literally pulled the toilet out from under the party.
Oh gods, that's just cruel. Funny, but cruel, and decidedly unhygienic.
It just goes to show that a mimic can disguise itself as any object, even the most unglamorous.
Adventurers, you may want to triple-check the privy next time your character answers nature's call.
Finally, we have The House of Horrors. One creative dungeon master describes a false Hydra-style mimic that posed as an entire cozy cottage in the woods.
The party finds a pleasant home with a kindly old couple inviting them in for tea. Everything seems normal until a guest notices the teacup is sticking to their hand. Suddenly, the facade drops. The walls and furniture melt into fleshy tendrils. The floor gapes open, and the hapless adventurers are sucked down into a digestive chamber in the basement. The group barely escaped, horrified and a bit traumatized, exactly as the DM intended. To make it worse, that house mimic wasn't dead. It simply uprooted and slithered off, reappearing later disguised as a barn in another town, stalking the party like a persistent predator.
Well, that's one way to ensure your players never accept another invitation for tea. Facing a creature that literally changes the scenery around you must have made for a truly surreal D&D session.
It seems like every dungeon master has their own twist. Mimics as locked vaults, mimics as magic shop items, even mimics posing as seemingly friendly NPCs.
The common thread? These encounters are memorable. Players talk about them for years. A well-placed mimic can turn a banal treasure grab into a moment of high drama or a dark comedy in an instant. As one GM Riley noted,
One well-placed mimic makes them doubt everything in that dungeon. It keeps players on their toes.
Love them or hate them, mimics create stories that get shared around the gaming table.
or on the internet.
Again and again.
All right, DMs, GMs, and game designers of all ilks, this segment is for you.
Let's talk about how to use mimics effectively in your own campaigns. I've put together some tools, variants, and tricks to help you make the most of these monstrosities. First up, let's roll on my random mimic encounter table. I'll roll a d6 to see what kind of mimic might be lurking in your next dungeon.
And it's a 3.
Innocent furniture, a comfy chair, a coat rack, a bed, even a toilet. Any mundane piece of furniture can be a hidden mimic. The next time the weary party plops down on a bed at the tavern, you might just shout, "The bed grapples you. Roll initiative!"
But why stop at the classics? Let's talk about some variant mimics that go beyond the basic stat block.
This summer's blockbuster hit, Mini Mimics, The Swarm, starring Sigourney Weaver.
Who says a mimic must be chest size or larger?
Consider this. A swarm of tiny mimics. Perhaps a cluster of coins, books, or rocks that are all mimics working in unison. Individually, they're weak, but together they could overwhelm or distract.
Imagine reaching for a gold piece only to have it bite your finger.
Which brings us to my next idea.
Hive Mimic, The Colony.
Picture this. A mimic tree that can shed mimic fruits, smaller versions that roll or skitter away to attack independently. The mimic queen form distracts the party as its spawned minions flank them.
Ooh, maybe the party can defeat the core and watch the mini mimics scatter.
What do you think, Rhea? Got any good mimic ideas?
Yeah, let me just pass this note to the epic movie trailer guy.
Symbiotic Mimic, The Friendly One.
Not all mimics need to be enemies. D&D lore has hinted some mimics are intelligent and could bargain rather than fight. You might introduce a mimic who willingly accompanies the party. Perhaps a sentient chest that carries loot in exchange for food. This is basically Terry Pratchett's luggage in RPG form.
It could provide comic relief and occasional peril.
If it gets hungry, watch out!
Colossal Mimic, The Siege Monster.
Okay, epic movie trailer guy is getting in on the action. I like it.
This could be kind of like one of our tavern tales.
Sure. We can scale up a mimic to truly epic proportions. House-sized, ship-sized, even town-sized. A castle mimic could literally rearrange rooms inside its belly, trapping intruders in a living maze.
Just be prepared. This kind of encounter could be an adventure arc in itself.
Now for our top 5 GM tips for milking the most mayhem from your mimics.
Tip number 1, use sparingly, use cleverly.
This is the golden rule. One great mimic encounter per campaign is far more effective than a dozen predictable ones. Mimics work best as a surprise spice, not a staple. Place one when the players least expect it for maximum impact.
Tip number 2, foreshadow, but don't give it away.
The art of a good mimic trap is dropping subtle hints that something's off.
A perception check might reveal the chest has fresh scratch marks near the lock.
Or a character gets a faint whiff of acidic saliva in a room that otherwise smells of dust.
Clever players might get suspicious, but don't telegraph too strongly. Which brings us to
Tip number 3, subvert player expectations.
if your group is already paranoid and poking every object, turn that against them.
One DM recounted a dungeon where there was no mimic at all. The players' paranoia slowed them to a crawl and led them to smash tons of furniture.
You could also double bluff. Announce a chest is obviously a mimic, but it really is just a decorative chest with a gnarly design.
Keep them guessing.
Tip number 4, reward caution or boldness.
If players do think to check for mimics in a smart way, say tapping a chest with a pole or using a minor spell, consider rewarding that ingenuity. Perhaps the mimic reveals itself without its surprise advantage?
Conversely, if a player is comically reckless,
I dive into the pile of gold head first.
a mimic is a perfect consequence.
Tip number 5, have fun descriptions.
Mimics are icky and absurd. Lean into that when narrating. The treasure chest's lid suddenly bends in the middle, gaping into a maw lined with rows of jagged teeth. A rubbery purple tongue lolls out, slapping against your armor, drooling adhesive goo.
The more sensory detail, the more memorable the encounter. From ancient legends of shape-shifting tricksters to that mimic in your last dungeon crawl that nearly TPK'd the party, the concept of the mimic taps into something universal. The thrill of the unexpected.
It's a reminder that in fantasy, as in life, appearances can deceive, and sometimes your greatest prize might just be a monster in disguise.
When was the prize a monster in disguise in real life, Rhea?
Well, that's a story for another podcast.
Anyway, next time you warily approach a treasure chest, sword drawn with a suspicious squint in your eye, just remember,
The spirit of the mimic is alive and well in our stories, lurking wherever our guard is down.
this has been Monsters in Disguise, the horrifying truth about mimics, on the Tome and Torch Podcast. I'm Dex Modifier,
And I'm Rhea Frost.
reminding you to always check for teeth before you reach for that loot.
Happy hunting, and may your treasure chests always contain actual treasure.
Hey, wait, is this microphone moving?
Produced, written, and recorded by Madeline Jarbo. Music by Apheline. The Tome and Torch Podcast is a production of Tome and Torch Press. All monsters mentioned are fictional. We hope.